right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving on to our fan favorites of shout outs and rants. We're going to take the same order, but I'm going to bat fifth after Mr. Armstrong. Karen Moore, do you have a shout out and or rant for us today?
I do, and I hope I don't take any wind, Jonathan, out of your sails, Mr. Armstrong, at least, because I've been in the UK for both the elections and the UEFA 2024 Cup. Very little going on in my corner of the world, whether it was London or up here in Cumbria on the elections. But man, oh man, my shout out to the England team who has really pulled it out of a hat. I am not such a huge sports fan, but I will definitely be watching England staying on Sunday.
Go England. Mr. Kelly, you have a shout out and or rant for us?
I do have a rant, and Karen alluded to this earlier, I believe. My rant is against Tractor Supply Company and this nuttiness that happened a couple of weeks ago now, where a right-wing blogger podcaster by the name, I believe, of Bobby Starbuck, if that's his real name, I don't even know what to say there. But Mr. Starbuck started ranting about how Tractor Supply Company was a woke company and that people, and of course by people, he means people like him who are white, conservative, Christian nationalist types, who I guess he thinks are the right thinking people in America, and the rest of us don't count. But people should boycott Tractor Supply because it engaged in DEI programs and awareness of its carbon emissions, trying to reduce them. And Tractor Supply had actually received praise over years for working slowly, methodically to be more inclusive, be more aware of the environment. And then Starbucks shotguns this complaint across the internet. Everybody's all up in arms. Share price drops 7%. Keep that in mind, because we're going to get back to that. And so Tractor Supply almost immediately retreats. They abandon all of their DEI efforts, cut their DEI roles, abandoned their support for gay pride events in the month of June, withdrew their carbon emissions, and all of this other stuff. They basically just folded like you got a 4 high on your Texas Hold'em hand. It was just immediate and total collapse. And then the blogger, I guess he said that everything was now fine. Of course, Tractor Supply is now facing a backlash to that from all the other people in America who point out that some of their customers are in fact Black or Latino or gay or are not Christian nationalists, and they don't like this. I have so many issues with this. First off, let's just focus on the basics. Somebody makes an allegation against the company, the share price drops, and then all is good. He withdraws, he's happy, and the share price goes back up. How do we know this wasn't just a market manipulation scheme from the start? Because that's what it looks like on the outside. Somebody could have made a killing if they had known that Mr. Starbuck was going to make these kind of allegations. So I wonder about that and whether this was just a setup from the start. But secondly, when we talk about caring for stakeholder groups and the different stakeholder groups, and I get that shareholders are important, but what does this say? The CEO of Tractor Supply, Hal Lawton, what does this say about his view of employees at the company who might be minority, who might be gay, who might just not agree with the right-wing nuts who are out there attacking the company and the share price? Like, he basically said, all of you customers who are diverse, all of you employees who are diverse, anybody who values that, you are of lesser importance than the share price, which is now going to be driven, I guess, by this right-wing cuckoo-kadoo guy who is just fomenting outrage on Twitter. Is that the message he wants to send to his employees and his customers, that they're not as important as those folks? What is going on? I think that CEO and Tractor Supply deserve every bit of backlash they get, because they should have stood up and said our customer base and our employees are more important than some crackpot on Twitter shotgunning around these allegations and trying to manipulate the share price maybe. It's just a bad spectacle, and it never should have happened.
Mr. Barks, do you have a shout out and or rant for us today?
Actually, I had a couple of them, but I think you all took them, so I'll kind of pile on a little bit here. But I guess when it comes to safety, I know that we've spoken about Marshan and Bluebell and some of the other cases and some of the commonalities there related to safety and how they link to overall compliance, or the general theme there about overall compliance. I guess my rant really is, if I had to unpack and repack the whole thing, is I just don't think that organizations understand corporate governance. I really don't. I think there's a lot of talk about it. I think people attend classes and they think they understand it. But when you start to talk about the components of a governance framework, business practices and ethics, and disclosure and transparency, and enterprise risk management, and communication, and things like that, and you ask people to provide some context behind it, you get nothing. It's almost like, I can't remember who mentioned Boeing's 3 core values. I think it might have been Keir. I'd be interested if you walked around Boeing and therapy, fine, you name them, but what do they mean? Kind of like when I go back, and Matt can attest to this, is I asked, what does internal controls mean? And I think we say a lot of things. We've talked about for years that compliance programs can't be a paper tiger and that we need to document things. That's wonderful. But I think we need to go back and make sure that the people that are supposed to be held accountable really and truly understand the depth and breadth of the organization. And not only can they spout off the core values or spout off the components of a governance framework, but they actually understand what it means and how the parts and pieces all come into play when you're building out a culture of compliance. Because I don't think a lot of people do. So my rant really is, I'm going back to the board and I'm saying I don't think board members really understand corporate compliance. Prove me wrong.
Mr. Armstrong.
Yeah, I've had an embarrassment of riches this week. As Karen said, the football, by the way, it's correctly called football, not soccer, has been great news for England. The cricket, a historic victory over the West Indies this morning, the retirement of possibly the greatest bowler ever in cricket, Jimmy Anderson, this morning as well. But I'm going to shout out to Sir Keir Starmer. I think a historic victory for the Labour Party. The most corrupt government in my lifetime have gone. And I think there's a good news story. I mean, obviously, I'm slightly partial. As many of you know, I went to the same university as Sir Keir. He's just ahead of me. We had some of the same teachers. I have met him. I have chatted to him. I wouldn't say we're friends, but I think I'm impartial in that I think it's a good news story for the country. He obviously went to a state grammar school. This isn't the hallowed halls of Eton or Harrow, where we've recruited prime ministers from of late. We're trying something different. He's somebody who has had a career as a public servant. He spent 5 years as the director of public prosecution, a task that is the envy of nobody, I think. So he's done the hard yards as a public servant, and now he's got the chance to be the chief public servant of all. So I think it bodes well. It's a first week. We're a week in. Obviously, Tom and I have done a podcast with much more detail on what the election might mean. It's not without its challenges. The Labour Party is divided. There are still some nutty people. I know Mrs. Fox, I think, called me a left-wing nutcase or something, but there are people certainly more left-wing than me that remain in the Labour Party. But early days, and certainly a splendid victory, and certainly a very dignified campaign. Certainly, spoiler alert, by the standards of what you're about to get this year.
All right, I'm going to go in a little bit different direction, but with a similar theme. I'm going to have a sports theme, and I'm going to shout out to Paul Skenes. Who's Paul Skenes? He is a rookie pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He threw 11 starts in 2024, has a win-loss record of 6-0, a 1.9 ERA. He's thrown 66 innings with 89 strikeouts. He has two outings where he hasn't allowed a hit, although his manager will not let him complete the game, so he does not have a no-hitter. And he is the first rookie pitcher in 28 years to be named as the starter for the All-Star game. So for those of us who haven't had the chance to see Paul Skenes yet, he will be starting in the All-Star game for the National League. And frankly, I can't wait. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great episode.